Hi, and welcome back to the Kids of the King podcast. I'm here with some friends that have been just really encouraging in my life, so I'm happy to have them here today. Why don't y'all introduce yourself?
Hi, my name is Christian. I've known Andreas for a couple of years, and I'm really excited to be here.
My name's Parker, in the exact same boat as Christian on that one.
All right, awesome. Well, before we get started talking about service, there's so much to unpack there, so we'll go ahead and pray and then hop right into it. Father, thank you for this time. I pray that just our words would not be our own, but would be yours. I pray that this would sink deep in our hearts and in the listener's heart. I pray that there would be some sort of application from this, that we wouldn't just agree with what anyone has to say, but we'd actually do something about it, and this would just have an impact on our life. I pray all of this in your name. Amen. All right, so we have the topic of service, which is a very broad topic, so we'll try to narrow it down. The first question that I have for y'all is just, what is service, and why should Christians serve? And we're not talking about Christian to my right here. We're talking about, believers in Christ.
Right. Yeah, so I was kind of trying to think about what service means, and at least what it has meant to me in my life, which obviously, can vary on the person. But kind of the definition that I started zeroing in on from reading different verses and kind of just thinking about it was just the helping those who need it selflessly. Mm-hmm. I thought that's kind of how I broke down the idea, because I think the important idea of service isn't it's not it's a job or a work, because in that scenario you're getting some sort of compensation for that. But I think service is you're doing something to help someone and not expecting anything in return, and not doing it for any sort of response like that.
In that way, it's almost like a sacrifice, maybe.
Right.
Where we're sacrificing our time, or sacrificing our ability, or financial things like that. We're sacrificing those things to help other people, or to help the kingdom of God.
Exactly.
Yeah, I sort of made my own definition up, so I don't know if this is the perfect one, but I just have humble acts of love. And so that's kind of along the lines of what you were saying, that, it's something loving, so it does have to be a sacrifice, but then done out of humility. Yeah. So I know Jesus talks a lot about how the Pharisees were doing things for their own benefit, and I wouldn't consider that service. Kind of along that idea. Do you have anything to add to that, Parker?
I think, the idea of sacrifice, and also that it's not for you. Mm-hmm. The whole point of service is that you're doing it for other people. You're not doing it to prop yourself up or to make yourself look better in certain people's eyes. You're doing it for the good of the kingdom of God.
Yeah, so along those lines of why we shouldn't serve, so why should Christians serve?
I think it's honestly one of our biggest responsibilities as Christians is just to serve other people. That is one of our main jobs. Whether or not those are also Christians who are struggling, non-Christians, helping out our local church, literally anywhere, that is one of our biggest jobs, is to just serve other people. Because that's the way that Jesus lived his life. That's the way, he's known as the humble servant. He just affected and impacted every single person around him by serving them.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think service is something that's really important to the Christian faith. I think even on just a super high level, if you think about it, one of the biggest things that Jesus emphasized was the Great Commission, and that's just the biggest act of service, because at the end of the day, we can do service in all sorts of ways, and most of those ways are really great. Mm-hmm. But the biggest form of service that we can do to someone, especially someone that isn't Christian, is by sharing with them the gospel of Jesus, because I think that fits into the definition of perfectly, because you're sacrificing your time and your words to just tell someone something that is the greatest gift that you could give anyone, and you're not expecting anything in return. So just a super basic answer, I think, is just that's just what we're told to do, and I think that's just one of the strongest duties that we have as Christians, as not just keeping it to ourselves, but through an act of service, sharing that with other people.
Yeah. So a little while ago I was thinking about Jesus and how we think of him as, a servant. And I started going throughout the life of Jesus in my head and thinking how did Jesus serve? And the first thing that came to mind was washing feet. I think that's a pretty familiar example.
Pretty stereotypical.
But I was where else is Jesus a servant? And then I just thought his whole life is service.
Yeah.
Whether he was teaching or healing people or doing chores as a kid, he was serving everyone constantly. Mm-hmm. So it's something that, like you said, we're called to do, and something that we should do to mirror Jesus' life.
And on that note, actually, I wrote down a verse that I think kind of fits in really good there. The first verse that I wrote down when we were even working on any of these questions was Mark 10:45.
Yep.
It just says, "For even the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve, and to give his life as a ransom for many." I think that just like sums it up perfectly. Like, he came, and the purpose was an act of service. And I think that's something that's really important that we pay attention to.
Yeah, and I love how it's not like this thing where we are giving of ourselves, but Jesus actually promises us like a reward. And in that passage, he talks about how the first will be last and the last will be first.
Right.
And I believe he says like the greatest must be like the slave of all. And so in our culture, we think the greatest must be the person who like puts themselves, who's constantly like taking wealth, taking fame and all sorts of things. But Jesus has like a reverse economy where he says that whoever gives the most and whoever, is humble is actually going to be first in the kingdom of heaven.
Yeah. In the context of that passage, it's James and John are like talking to Jesus, and I believe it starts off and they're like, Jesus, like, what should we do? Like, tell us, like, how can we like be good stewards of God? And like that's like how he ends it all off, like that conversation. He's like, serve, like be a servant to others and to help them. So I think that was like that's really important.
Yeah, that scene in The Chosen is so good.
Yeah,
I have to say that.
Yeah, I love that
crazy.
stuff. In 1 Peter 4:9-11, I think it just summarizes service really well. It says, "Show hospitality to one another without grumbling. As each has received a gift, use it to serve one another as good stewards of God's varied grace. Whoever speaks, as one who speaks oracles of God. Whoever serves, as one who serves by the strength of God that supplies, in order that in everything God may be glorified through Jesus Christ. To him belong glory and dominion forever and ever. Amen." And the whole idea of that verse is that our end goal of service is obviously to help other people, but it is to glorify God through Jesus, right? So our whole job of serving other people is to bring glory to God. And it even mentions like the idea of how like we each have different gifts, each have different ways we can serve, but it doesn't matter how exactly we're serving. It's just the very idea of service that is so necessary to glorifying God.
Yeah, I love I believe it's 1 Corinthians, there's like a whole section about like spiritual gifts. And for me, I think of spiritual gifts, not consciously, but subconsciously, I kind of like rank some.
Yeah.
Like the gift
It's
of
so
like
good.
helper is like at the bottom, and the gift of prophecy all the way at the top. But all of them should be service, because Paul says like the greatest gift is love. And so if we do any of these without love, it's like a really bad instrument, or someone that can't sing, something like that, It's like a terrible noise you don't want to hear. And that's what we need to do, everything out of service, even if it's just exercising our spiritual gift or doing chores.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So looking at that idea of humility when it comes to service, because I think it does require humility. How do we serve authentically? Like, how do we do it in a humble manner and it not be like out of like selfish intent?
Yeah. I know that at least
You got
for
it.
me, like this is something that I've been thinking about a lot recently. I know like the past couple of Sundays I've been talking about this a lot, and that like Bible study of like how to be like genuine in my faith, because I think I can definitely like very much slip into the idea of just like check a box like faith. And I know that like people talk about that all the time, but I can just be like, oh, I'll read my Bible because that's the right thing to do, or I'll just be like, I know that's what I'm told to do, and I know it's probably right, so that's what I'm gonna do. Or I even have like this little schedule that I like knock off every day for like summer to make sure I'm doing things, and it's like super easy for me to like read my Bible just so I can like check off the box, like literally physically do that. So I just think like it's a couple of passages that I, like have kind of been sitting with me. Is the first is James 1:27, and it says, it like kind of finishes off by talking about how he helps orphans and widows in their distress and keep oneself from being polluted by the world. So James is kind of talking about like ways to like serve, sort of like fitting underneath this topic, and it's talking about the idea of like how you shouldn't be polluted by the world. I think is really important in that context, is like how you should be serving like orphans and widows. Like it's not just talking about orphans and widows, like it's not like you can only serve orphans and widows. Like obviously you can serve everyone, but the context of that is it's talking about like serve the people that need it, and don't be doing it for like a worldly purpose. And then just the other passage, I've been reading through Matthew recently, and in Matthew 6, that starts off by saying, "Be careful not to practice your righteousness in front of others to be seen by them." And I think that's like exactly this idea, just like how to serve genuinely, is that like don't do it as a a way of getting some sort of reward, because that is against the whole idea of service, because like we talked about that, it's like helping those who need it selflessly, or like humble acts of love. Like it's not just an act of love to receive something, it's a humble act of love so that you are just serving and not receiving something in return, if that makes any sense.
Yeah. I love how in that verse, I think it's James 1:27, right?
Yeah.
So it says, religion that is pure is undefiled before God.
Mm-hmm.
And I know, like, in our culture, religion gets a bad rap, and that's kind of justified, if we're being honest.
Yeah.
And people will sometimes say, Christianity is a relationship, not a religion. But it's like, no, it is a religion. It's a religion that involves a relationship. And what James is saying is that what pure religion looks like is like service. And I think sometimes for me, I think about religion as being like going to church. And that's like part of it. That's a practice.
Yeah.
But he says that pure religion is giving to widows and orphans, which I think can get lost sometimes in Christianity.
I think the biggest thing for me is just making sure that it's not a performance, like something that I feel the need to perform to like display to others, like, oh, look at me, I'm flexing my service muscles. In Philippians 2, verse 2, it says, "Then make my joy complete by being like-minded, having the same love, being one in spirit and of one mind. Do nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit. Rather, in humility, value others above yourselves." And so the idea is that's kind of what I was talking about earlier, in the idea of a sacrifice where you're inherently putting other people's interests above your own, right? And when you do that, then you start to realize, oh, I'm not performing here, right? Because my interests are not in mind. It's what I can do to other people, how I can impact them. I think that's just a really beautiful kind of summary of the idea, is that in humility, we're valuing other people above ourselves.
Yeah, and on that note, I was actually great because I put that in my notes
there we
too.
go. Come on,
too.
It's flowing together. Let's go.
So it's like we sometimes ask the question, like, how can we be humble? How can we be patient? Stuff like that. And like in that very passage, he says, like, how do we be humble? And he says, like, look at Christ. And he says that
Christ,
have
the same mindset,
being like
form.
He's like in the form of God, but he emptied himself and took the form of a servant. So if we want to be humble, like, we have to like look at Jesus's life. And this is sort of like a quote I heard. I forgot who said it, but it's kind of obvious. But it's what you look at or what you contemplate is who you become.
Right.
So if you're looking at the news all day, you may not be like a very happy person. But if you're looking at Jesus and his acts of service, you may become more servant-hearted and more humble in that sense.
Mm-hmm. And another thing on that idea is, like, even if we feel the need, because like we're all drawn to the idea of propping ourselves up, like performing for other people to like make ourselves look good, right? But even later in Philippians, it talks about the idea that every gain that he had made, even like religiously, like religious accomplishments that Paul had made, were all considered a loss because he had not done them for the sake of Christ. So even like from a functional perspective, like if we're talking about doing things, like if it is not for Christ, it is inherently a loss, right? Like there's no actual like lasting fulfillment of it. There's nothing that actually fulfills us, that brings us that contentment, because we're just trying to prop ourselves up, and ultimately that's empty.
Yeah, there's a passage, I think it's probably in multiple Gospels, but the people that go to Jesus saying, I cast out demons in your name, I did all of this in your name, but Jesus says, "Depart from me, I never knew you, workers of lawlessness." And so, like you said, it has to be done with the heart of Jesus, the heart of serving people, because we're commanded to love people. And out of the love that we have in our heart is how we're able to serve people. If it's, trying to prop yourself up, that's just like being a Pharisee, really. Yeah. And that's, in some cases, it can push people away from Christianity rather than like bring them towards it.
I just know that for me, like, being genuine in your faith has been something that I've struggled with a lot, because I feel like, especially like a lot of the communities I'm in are just like very Christian oriented, which is like awesome, but I think it can really help me slip into the area of being like doing it so I can say I do it. Like I know that like at my Bible study or at my youth group they ask like, have you guys been reading the Bible consistently? And I want to be able to truthfully say that, but like part of me wants to be able to truthfully say that, so they're like, oh, Christian, like, he's reading his Bible, like he's praying every day, like he's doing all the right things. And obviously, like, the consistency that I want isn't bad, but it's, like, sort of having that heart of, like, being consistent in my faith and then, like, by proxy, consistent in my service. Like, I know that, like, I can be really self-centered in, like, the things that I want to do, but I just know that, like, I've that's why I'm actually reading through the Gospels right now. Is one of the reasons I've like decided it, because I just think like the more and more we can focus on like reading Jesus, like the more and more that's what we're contemplating. I think like that's like more and more what I'm hoping I can become. Like I just think like his character is just so selfless. Like he wasn't doing it for anything other than just to help other people, and I think like the more and more that I've been reading about that, that's like a way that like has been helping me.
Yeah. If you look at other religions around the world, a lot of them have like Jesus in some way incorporated into their story. And I think it's because if you look at the life of Jesus, it's hard to like criticize him. It's like, dude, what were you doing washing people's feet? Like how like terrible
Good person.
I know it's
like ridiculous.
It's
How could
naturally
you?
like attractive. Jesus's his life is just like the service and like the selflessness that God had in just like serving people. It's so impactful. So that's awesome that you're reading the Gospels. Yeah. So on that idea about we know what it looks like because we can look at Jesus, but we are not all like first century rabbis or first century disciples.
Right.
So what does that
Super
look
cool,
like?
but-
It would be pretty cool. You can like wear prayer tassels and stuff. But what does that look like in our lives, specifically as young people? Like where can we serve?
I think obviously it can like manifest itself in so many different ways. But I think like the first step ought to be like a change of our like heart posture.
Yeah.
Like if we can like change the way that we view our interaction with other people when they're putting their interest above our own, I think then service almost just comes naturally.
Yeah.
Right? We're just like drawn to it naturally. Like, oh, this person was struggling. Like, let me see if I can help them out. Right? Because we're just drawn to that because we view their interest as more important than ourselves. And so I think it starts like from within. Obviously, like there are some ways that we can just start implementing that, and then that can also affect our heart posture because we can see like the benefits of it, right? If we just like consistently, I don't know, like serving kids ministry or something like that, we can start to see the benefits of that, how we're like blessing, parents and the kids as well, and like even the people also working there because then they don't have to work quite as often. Like when we're blessing them in that way, we can see the benefits, and that can in turn change our heart posture. But I think it really does start with the heart.
Yeah, I know that like the church, and this isn't like the church has it like all around all the time. Like I just think like I know that like people in the church, or like even just like Christians in like their everyday life, like can really easily like eventize serving, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
So we go
that's
on
so real.
like a week-long mission trip, and it's like time for service, everybody. Like it's like we're gonna go do this, and it's gonna be awesome. And those aren't bad things. Like obviously, like I've gone on week-long mission trips. They're awesome. Like they're a great way to spread like the gospel, and those aren't wrong. But I would say that like service is more of like a day-to-day thing than like just like an event that you do every once in a while. Like I know people say that about like just general faith a lot too, and I think it's like also true of service. Like faith isn't just like a Sunday thing. Like it's not just the thing that you do like when you put on like your collared shirt and your jeans and you like show up to church and like have your hands up in worship and like taking notes during the like sermon, and then just like don't take any of that to heart when you go home. It's like a all the time sort of thing. So like I like when I was like kind of thinking about this, like one of the things I wrote down was just like where can young people serve? It's just like anywhere, and then I put in parentheses like especially at home. Like I just think like a great place to start is just like in the people you're seeing most often, like in your home or in your house, or just like the people you're surrounded. Like it doesn't actually have to be like your physical home, just like where you are, like wherever you are, like there is gonna be some way you can serve. And we don't have to like eventize it or like romanticize it and making it this really big thing. Like I think serving people is just something that we should be doing on like a daily level. So like I think service in a way to do it on like an easier, like on like more day-to-day level, is just being like more open to like talking to people.
Yeah.
Like I know that both of you know like I gave a speech about this for speech and
Yeah.
debate, so I'm like really
Did
passionate
pretty well
about
too,
this.
though.
Yeah, okay. Well, yeah, so like I know I talk about this a lot, but I'm like very passionate about it. Like I think like one of the easiest ways that we can serve is just like by connecting with people. Like, and I think we can do that in our day-to-day life, like when we go to the grocery store, or we go to the gas station, or like whatever. Like, there are just so many people that are in such desperate need for connection and in need of service, and we can just so easily give it to them, like by saying hi or like, how's your day?
Yeah.
And like obviously, like it might take some time or whatever, but it's not that big of a sacrifice either. It's not like, how could I spend 5 minutes talking to someone who really needed it? Like, how will I ever like be okay. Like it's not that big of an investment like either, but it's so meaningful to them, right? If you look at it even from like a cost benefit analysis, like here's what you're losing, 5 minutes of your time, and here's what you gain from just spending 5 minutes with someone who really needs it. I think another area that we're able to be, I guess, more service oriented is to be really, really intentional with the relationships that we have with people. Because I know certain aspects of service are not going to be as meaningful to people. Like some of my friends who are like super introverted are not going to maybe love me just like random like FaceTiming them on like a certain day. Like they're not gonna enjoy that as much. But then there's certain things I can do by blessing them in other ways. So just being intentional with that it's not really like a one-size-fits-all solution. It's like, give every, close friend of yours like a text or something like that, something encouraging. Like there's different ways that we can be service-minded, and we need to be intentional when doing that. And I guess we just need to pursue meaningful relationships with these people.
Yeah, I've heard it said like your closest neighbor is like your family, because they're literally like right next to you. But I love what both of y'all said, because they like tied together perfectly. Like you were talking about how it's like a heart posture you have. Christian, you were saying like how it's like something you do anywhere. And the reality is, if you have a servant mindset, then anywhere you go is like the mission field. If you have a missionary mindset, like anywhere you go is a mission field. We're supposed to be on mission like 24/7. Like it's not 24/7, but like pretty much all the time. Like not when we sleep, but when we go to the grocery store, when we go to school, when we go to anywhere it may be, we're supposed to be witnessing to people. And that is the greatest act of service. And that's what, Jesus spent his whole life doing, telling people the good news. And that was, the best act of service, because it's the most loving thing that we can do. Thinking about some like I said, like it's anywhere. But just to sort of visualize it, like I said, you can do it at home, you can do it at school, you can do it at church, you can do it at your sports practice or music practice. You can really do it like anywhere. Just maybe asking someone about their day could be, an act of service, humble act of love. Or like if you're good at church, like helping set up or set down or take down, I guess is how you say take down.
I think it's tear down.
Tear down. There you go. There you go.
Yeah, there we go.
Anything, like if you're just looking for it, opportunities will come up. I remember just a few, I guess it was like 2 months ago now, my church went to, we did a service project at this like food ministry place. And I was thinking to myself, I was like, oh, let's go. I got my service in, And then we started listening
Check that box off.
Exactly. Yeah. It could be another box we check off, but hearing the stories of the people that worked there, they were like very, very old. They had one guy who I think retired at like 100. Like,
Whoa,
no joke.
goodness.
He was like, okay, guys, I'm retiring. And they're like, yeah, we don't blame you. Like, you could have done that like 7 years ago and we'd be good.
Like 20 years ago, like
Yeah,
30
exactly.
or 40.
But like all these people were just like, that was their calling, was just to live a life that was like below most people's living standards and provide food, even though there was like a bunch of violence in that area. It was not a great area to live in, but they committed their life to service, and I don't think they'll ever regret that.
Yeah.
And I can guarantee you, like, those people were not doing it because they thought it looked good.
Yeah.
Right? Or because they like particularly enjoyed it. Right? Like if bro's 100 and like still grinding, like I don't know, when I'm like 65, I'm like I'd like a break, please. Like, but like he's still going. And so that really shows like it really comes from the heart, right? There really isn't a logical explanation why he would continue to do that. It's outside that, surpasses our understanding, but he's still drawn to it because of just the beauty of the gospel.
Yeah. And like you said, it was out of love, because if he just did it out of, I guess, like selfishness, he would burn out. Like if you do something you don't enjoy and something you're not passionate about, you're going to burn out.
Yeah.
You can burn out doing something you're passionate about, but as long as you're like connected to the vine, then you're never going to burn out, because there's a consistent life source coming from that vine, as we're the branches and we bear the fruit.
Yeah. I had like this thought when like Parker brought up the idea of like the serving, like, oh, I just served for 5 minutes. Like, I don't think like it can be 5 minutes. It can be less than 5 minutes. It can be more than 5 minutes. But like the thing that really struck me is just the idea that like you can give only 5 minutes of your time, and that can help lead to someone living an eternity with Jesus. Yeah. Like even if it's like, you talk about like the guy retiring when he's like 100, like even if you give your entire life to service, from the day you're born, like I don't know how you're doing that as a baby, but like from the day you're born to the day you die, if you give every single waking hour to Jesus and serving him, that still is such a small fragment of time to the benefit that you give one person if you help them like meet Jesus, because you can give them an eternity, so you can give them infinite lifetimes of being with Jesus from just literally 5 minutes or just an afternoon or just like a year of serving. And I think that's like what really is really cool about service is like you can really give so much. Like right now, like even if you do not have like a lot, even if you don't have like a lot of money or like any like tangible thing to give someone, like that's like physical that they can feel, like you can still give someone like the greatest thing like ever. And like all of us can do that. Like just sitting in this room, like we could go give someone millions and millions of years just to be with Jesus. And I think that's what's so cool about Christianity.
Yeah, I was just thinking about this right now, but there's a story in the Bible about a widow giving like 2 pennies into like the offering, and she could have thought like, well, first of all, she gave like her entire income, but she says, or she gives 2 pennies, and she could be thinking, you know, this is like nothing. But if you think about it, she literally like created a passage in the Bible, which probably has impacted like so many different people just from giving like 2 pennies. So yeah, we don't have to give millions of dollars to be a giver. We don't have to, you know, serve, you know, 1,000 hours to be a servant. We just have to give what we have. So yeah, any other thoughts?
Yeah, in Philippians again. Sorry, I just read Philippians like 2 weeks ago, so I'm like
Okay.
total Philippians mode. But in Philippians 2, Paul talks about the idea of like even if everything that he did like didn't have the biggest impact, like he would still be glad and rejoice in Jesus because of the work, like because of the opportunity, the privilege that he had to just serve others and serve God through others. Because that was all that mattered to him. Like even if he didn't see the benefits of it, even if like he didn't impact X number of people, that was enough for him. Just the very concept of being able to like pour himself out like for the good of the gospel.
Yeah, that's so powerful. Well, this has been such a good time talking about service, and like you said, it's like our call. That's what the Great Commission is to be like servants for Jesus. So we'll go ahead and wrap up here, and if y'all have any other ideas that you want to talk about, make sure to leave them in the comments section. Any other questions you have that you want us to answer, make sure to do that. But for now, that's it. Hope to see you in another episode, and never forget that Jesus loves you.